Now, if you'll recall, on Sunday, we learned that Jem is a disabled spriteling. They have one wing that doesn't work, which means they can't fly. So today we're going to pick up where we left off with Jem and one of their caretakers visiting a very magical old fairy and asking her for help with their newest scheme, which was to get Jem claws and webs so they could climb around like a spider. So, let's see, where did we leave them? Last we spoke, Jem and their caretaker were in the littlest, greenest hill, having tea with a very old and beautiful fairy. Let's see what they're doing now. The fairy brought out their tea kettle, which was boiling, and some tea, and poured Jem a cup. Now the tea was a lovely blue when the fairy poured it. Jem was a little disappointed because the fairy had promised Jem the tea would be purple. Jem asked specifically. The fairy said, "Just wait! Wait and see!" And then she picked up a slice of lemon and squeezed it into the teacup. And the most magical thing happened. It turned bright and shining purple. And Jem was so excited that they clapped their hands and said, "Oh, it's beautiful." "I know," said the fairy. "It is very beautiful and purple, which is my favorite color, as I have already mentioned." "Oh," said Jem. "Oh, it's so lovely. Do you have a cookie to go with it?" The fairy smiled, because fairies know the hearts of spritelings are generally made glad by cookies. And she pulled out a shiny purple cookie tin and popped off the lid. "Here you go," she said, and handed Jem a chocolate cookie. Jem was a little sad that the cookie wasn't purple, but they were more glad that the cookie was chocolate. They took a bite, and it was dark and rich and smooth and everything that you'd want a chocolate cookie to be. It was the best chocolate cookie Jem had ever had. And after that first bite, they gobbled it all up. Then, after important things had been taken care of, they remembered why they had come. "So you were saying that you might be able to help us get claws and webs?" they asked. The fairy scrunched up her nose and said, "Well, let me think." And then she thought, which involved a good deal of fidgeting and rocking back and forth in her chair and twiddling her fingers and wriggling her eyebrows thought and she thought, and in desperation she scratched her chin, and that was when the idea came to her. "Oh, I know," she said, "but it might not be easy." "Oh," said Jem, feeling a little uncertainty creeping in. "But I can tell you if you like," said the fairy. "Please do," said Jem. "Well, I would need a hair from everybody in your community," said the fairy. "One hair. And then I'll make a magic spell potion and brew and bubble and boil and burble and make you claws and webs." "Oh," said Jem, feeling a little taken aback. "But what if they don't want to give us their hairs?" "That would be the sticking point," said the fairy. Jem and their caretaker looked at each other, and then they looked at the fairy. "Do you want to do it, Jem?" said the caretaker. "Do you want to try and ask them? They can say no, but it might be worth trying." "I guess so," said Jem. "I guess we can try, but I'm a little scared." "You don't have to do this," said the fairy. "We can try to figure out a different way. I just don't know of any that would be quite that easy. The others would all involve a lot more work from you. And you already have to do a lot of work once you get the claws and the webs." "I see," said Jem. "Well, it might be worth a shot. The worst that can happen is that some of them say no and we have to try to figure out a different plan." The caretaker smiled. They were feeling very proud of Jem because they were being so brave. "Well, take a cookie to go and come back and see me as soon as you have the hairs," said the fairy. So Jem and their caretaker took a cookie apiece. And then they said goodbye to the fairy and walked out through the purple door and up the littlest, greenest hill that you ever did see. And the caretaker knelt down, Jem climbed into the pouch, and the caretaker and Jem flew off back home. It was a long ride, and Jem was a little tired. But when they got home, Jem said, "Please, can we start asking people to give us their hairs? I do so want to have claws and webs and be able to crawl around on the rose bushes and the flowers and play hide and seek with the other spritlings." And their caretakers, even though they could see that Jem was tired, saw how important this was to them. So they said yes. Then began a couple of days of work for Jem and their caretakers. Because you see, they had to go around to all the houses and ask the fairies for their hair. And this took quite a while, as there were very many fairies in the community. But Jem was very patient, and their caretakers were very helpful, and between them, they managed to cover all of the fairies' houses by the end of the second day. Now, you may be wondering what the fairies and sprites had to say to this strange request. If anyone has ever asked you for a hair to do magic, you might know a little bit about this. It is not a simple thing. Giving someone your hair means that you're giving them part of yourself, and it's a big deal. So Jem wasn't sure if all of the fairies would be okay with it, especially when they learned that Jem wanted to crawl around in the same way that spiders do. And as we've discussed before, spiders are fairies' mortal enemies. And sure enough, some of the fairies were not very excited about this idea. Even once Jem explained why they wanted the hair, some of the fairies had trouble with it. But most of them said yes right away, even if they were a little uncertain, because they cared about Jem and they wanted Jem to have good things and to be able to play with their spriteling folk. But some of the fairies had to think about it, and some of them said some mean things, which hurt Jem very much in their heart. People think that making the world accessible, which means something that everybody can live in, is a very big job, and sometimes people get angry about it. And Jem was asking them to give up some of their resources, the things that they have, so Jem could live in the world and be happier. And some of the fairies were not very nice about this. But in the end, every single fairy gave a hair. And so Jem and their caretakers collected all of their hairs, and on the third day, Jem and another one of their caretakers made the long trip back to the littlest, greenest hill. So, when they arrived, they walked down the hill again and knocked on the door. "Hello, come in," said the fairy's voice. So they opened the door and went inside. And there was the fairy wearing a lovely witch's hat, which was beautiful dark purple, and a purple apron, and looking very splendid indeed. "You look lovely," said Jem. "We brought the hair." "Oh my gosh," said the fairy. "That is perfectly awesome. I didn't know if they would do it. It's a big deal." "Yes," said Jem. Some of them said some not very nice things about how I was really imposing on them. But they all gave the hair because I think they felt sorry for me, even the mean ones. "Well, that's not a very good reason to do it," said the fairy. "You don't need people to feel sorry for you. You just need them to be accommodating." "Yes, indeed," said Jem. "What does accommodating mean?" "It means that they make it, said the fairy, thinking. "It means that they give you what you need so you can live how you want to, just like everybody people did that for me." "Oh," said Jem just then, for they saw a big purple cauldron boiling over the fire. "That's an amazing cauldron," said Jem. "I just love all the purple in your house." "Yes, indeed," said the fairy. "Where's that hair?" So Jem and the caretaker handed over the hair. The fairy took the hair and carefully threw it into the cauldron. Only a fairy can toss things carefully. And then the fairy chanted mysterious words, which I will not repeat because magic is sacred. And she stirred the cauldron, and it boiled and bubbled and brewed and burbled, and great delicious smells came wafting off of it, which is very strange when you consider that she was cooking hair. And after a long moment, the fairy said, Now, close your eyes and hold out your hands." So Jem did as they were told and closed their eyes and held out their hands and felt a large bundle drop into their hands. And they didn't even wait for the fairy to say, "Open your eyes," before they had opened their eyes and were looking. There, in a sticky, wet purple cloth bundle, were all sorts of strange things. There were things that looked a little bit like fancy bracelets with large hook things coming off of them. And there was a large, round thing that looked kind of like a spinning top, except with a sticky white substance protruding out of the end, the point that would normally spin on the table. Jem stared in wonder. "Are these?" "Yes, indeed," said the fairy. "They are claws and webs, and you can use them to crawl around and play with the other spritlings." said Jem. "They're so cool." And they tried putting on the claws, which fit over their hands and wrists, and made hooks coming out where their palms were. "How do the webs work?" they asked. "You just squeeze, and the web comes out," said the fairy. "And you never have to worry about it running out. I made it special that way." said Jem. "Oh, it's so awesome." And they squeezed the web, and a long strand spun quickly out and trickled down onto the floor and clung there. The rest of the afternoon was spent with the fairy teaching Jem how to use their new claws and webs. And Jem discovered that they had claws for their feet too, so they could climb around especially adeptly, which means very well indeed. And after a long, happy few hours of practice, Jem and the caretaker said goodbye again to the fairy and made the journey home. Now, I think we're about out of time for tonight, and we'll find out more about Jem and how they learn to use their claws and webs to play with the other sprites and to climb around like a spider, and how their community responded another time. But I can tell you that Jem made it all the way from the ground up to their house at the top of the rose bush, using only their claws and webs, and with one of their caretakers hovering very anxiously just behind them. And they were the proudest, happiest little spriteling in the community that night. I'm sure many more good things are in store for Jem, and we'll find out some of them another time. In the meantime, the story goes on, and I wish you a good night.